Hey again, YouTube. Matt back with yet more shed build. Today it is rafters. So chop saw, and more chop saw to get these things cut to the correct angle at both ends and to the correct length. I deviated from the plans I bought here yet again. There was supposed to be a 512 pitch roof, plus or minus. It's 22.5 degree cut on both ends of the rafters. If you go with that style of roof, you still have to buy 8-foot 2x4s because you're left with 6 and something feet long from the ridge down to the edge. Which means you're buying 8 feet of lumber and you're cutting off quite a bit of it. I live in a place that gets snow. Not a lot of snow. You're not going to see me in any videos like the Canadians with the super soakers that spray snow. It's not that bad, but we have been known to get 12 or 14 inches, and sometimes it's wet snow. And I thought, why cut off a bunch of wood that I just bought? Why not just make the roof a little bit steeper and use more of that lumber? I decided to go with a 30-degree cut at both ends of the board, which puts me in the neighborhood of a 7/12 pitch roof. That is steep as sheds go, but it is actually kind of on the shallow side compared to the homes around here. All of the houses have these architectural roofs that are 12/12 pitch. I don't think any of them are higher than that, but they're steep. I'm glad I'm not a roofer in this area. So going with a little bit, higher pitch on this roof is going to help it blend into the surroundings a little bit more. It's going to help it shed snow and rain and things a little bit more. And it costs me almost zero in additional materials because I had to buy the same 2x4s. I am still within the same length of OSB sheathing that I had to buy for the roof. I honestly don't remember if I had to buy an extra bundle of shingles or not to take care of the extra little bit of roof, but in the grand scheme of things, if I did, oh well. What I'm doing now is beginning to make the parallel cuts on the other ends of the rafters. This gives me what will end up being a horizontal surface once the rafter is installed at an angle. This also cuts them to the appropriate length, so it is as close to what passes for a precision operation as you're going to find in construction. It's fairly important that all the rafters come out exactly the same length and that they have the same angle on both ends. Otherwise, they won't meet up right at the ridge and they won't really be horizontal when they get outside the overhang of the shed. So what I've done is left the chop saw untouched from my first cuts. So I know that the cut I get on the other end will be exactly the same angle. To make sure they all come out the same length, I just set up a simple stop block at the far end of my cutting station. It's nothing more than one of the sticks that were underneath the bundles when I picked up the things at the home center. I'm gonna have to be a little bit careful to make sure that I get them butted up against their square, but for the most part, within construction tolerances, this should make sure that they all come out right. There are 26 of these things to cut to length. I have exactly 2 done. Time for me to get busy. Now that the 30-degree ends are cut on both ends of all of my rafter pieces, what I have to do now is lay out the notch where these rafters are going to sit over the sidewall, and I need to lay out where I'm going to chop it off square so that I have a nice 90-degree corner for my soffit and fascia. As it turns out, this one is pretty easy. All you have to do is grab a framing square, and if you come down here 2 inches, parallel, well, exactly on the edge of the cut, you'll find that this is the line that you need. It should come out to be 3.5 inches across here, and it does. It's just sort of a nice little sanity check. So that one's easy. The notch here, unfortunately, came out with a bunch of 16ths. So what you have to do is you have to measure in 5 15/16 from the point right here. So what I did is I set up an adjustable square to be that length, and you could just make a little mark right there. And then, again, grab your framing square and do the same trick, right? So you know you want it to line up with that notch, and it turns out that this is almost 2 inches. It's 1 15/16, but if you cut it 2, it's not going to hurt anything. You just hold that there, and then you pivot this until it lines up with 3 3/8. Well, once that's in place, you hold it down, you let it fall over, so then you have to double check it again, and you draw your line around there. And that will be the soffit cut and the bird's mouth notch to sit on the wall. I just have to lay out, what, 25 more of these, and then I have to figure out how I'm going to cut it. This cut, well, frankly, none of these cuts are that critical. I could line them all up and just do them with a handheld circ saw, or I may just cut them by hand. They're only 3.5 inch cuts. Good sharp saw, you'd be amazed how quickly you can go through pine. This is what the rafters are going to look like. I only have this one cut. I still have 12 more to do. But I wanted to check the fit and finish and just kind of make sure this was going to come together the way it's supposed to before I cranked out 12 more that turned out to be mistakes. The critical dimension on these rafters is the one where the tape is right now. That's the distance from the outside of the sheathing on one long wall to the outside of the sheathing on the other long wall. And it is supposed to come out 145 inches if it's an exact fit. I measured on the shed, and sure enough, it is exactly 145 inches. That's not terribly surprising because we really only cut the top and bottom plates of those short walls and cut them exactly to length. So the width of the top and bottom plate on the sidewall and the thickness of the sheathing were very exact dimensions, so it came out right. This contraption came out real close. If I get this angle completely tight together, I get 145 1/4 at the bottom. And that's okay. If it was an exact 145 inches, odds are I'd get the trusses up there and something would be off and I'd have to hammer them home and whatever. So splitting the difference of what'll end up being 1/8 of an inch extra cutout on the two sides, completely no big deal. The soffit will cover that. You'll never know it's there. So I am going to go ahead and nail this up. The cross brace is a full 8-foot 2x4. I don't see any reason to cut those. They go 7 feet 5.5 inches or something like that down the side. I do want to make sure I get those pretty close to even because they're going to be strongest if they're sitting perfectly horizontal when they get in there. And if I ever want to put a shelf in here, I don't know what I'd stick on a shelf that's up that high and is that small, but I'd like to keep the option open, and that's not going to do me any good if these are all different and all over the place. So that's just going to get nailed on down there. And up here at the top, I am going to cross nail this, but I am also going to hammer home these guys. This is a 3x6 mending plate, and I'm sure it says right on it, not for trusses. They pretty much all say that. You can order plates that are designed for structural truss use, but they cost a fortune and you have to order them and you have to wait for them. So I'm going to put in some nails and I'm going to use 2 of these, and then I'm going to look at it and say it's a shed. It's probably good enough. So let me get this tacked up, and that is going to be the end of this day because frankly I'm about out of sunlight.